In my daily life, with friends and family, hyperbolic statements like sacred, perfect, amazing, and the best ever are used conversationally to mean, I liked that, it was good, and I enjoyed that. It's this kind of exaggerated language that helps me communicate that I am enthusiastic about things, and that sharing something with you is bringing me joy. It's the very rare case that when I say something is my favorite, that it technically and literally is my favorite. It most often means simply that I like the thing, and I would like the thing to keep being. I think when it comes to people with the same nerd and correct mindset, that this is a common thing. We tend to be positive people. We're playful. Even in a defensive stance, we steer closer to clowning than we do fighting. That's why we're so freaking fun to be around. Joy is hard to hate. However, it's because of this overly expressive language and my becoming immune to its literal meaning that I have recently started thinking about something that should be unheard of. When it comes to pop culture, and fandom in particular, there are properties that are beloved and cherished and held to such a high regard that people agree universally that they are perfect. There are some things you just don't mess with. Films or books or art that should never be touched. It is amazing. It is the pinnacle of what it could be. It is untouchable. Language like this has stopped meaning their literal definitions for me, and I no longer catch the absoluteness of the claims. I hear them as playful, as hyperbole, and because I no longer hear the gavel being dropped on the finality of the judgment, I don't hear unassailable fact. I hear another person, like me, who loves stuff, saying they love stuff. And this is dangerous, because lately, I've been thinking about one of those perfect, untouchable properties that should never be messed with. And I've been thinking, maybe we should mess with it. So let's talk about that. But first, disclaimer time! This is not a review show! I am nerd incorrect. I'm passionate, opinionated, highly subjective, and so many times incorrect. I have to repeat, this is not a review show. I'm not going to objectively weigh any piece of art on any merits. What I will do is explore the things that make entertainment beautiful and explore the art created for us to consume while we live our lives. Thank you for joining me while I explore the adventures we have from inside the house.
I'm uncool, I'm the Urkel to everyone's Bill Murray. I've been broke in every sense of the word. And I keep chasing my next high score. Issues galore, I'm a walking, talking magazine. We all know that nobody reads. What's the use in words when they don't even understand me?
Welcome to The Adventures We Have from Inside the House, a podcast about entertainment, how and why we consume it, and how it shapes our lives. And more importantly, a podcast that celebrates the things you like, even if nobody else does. My name is Tim Riel, and I am Nerd Incorrect, the boy who loves entertainment of every kind and always seems to fall in love with the properties in art that don't always follow the crowd. Remaking, rebooting, tooling with, introducing to a new audience, whatever you want to call it, creating a new version of an old thing is on trend and big money. Spider-Man has been remade and rebooted so many times that the newest version didn't even include an origin story because we already knew it from the last 9 times it was made. Many people claimed annoyance that Spider-Man was being remade, but arguably, it's gotten better each time. And yeah, I liked Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. It's his Peter Parker that needed work. Superhero franchises seem to be immune from the don't touch this mentality. I think it's because comic book movies for a long time were awful. It wasn't until the 5th or 6th reboot of one of the superhero franchises that Iron Man came out and started defining what the medium should produce. And by then, we had already accepted reboots. Until this point in time, reboots weren't really a thing. No, the scourge of the elitist cinemaphile was the sequel. If a movie did well, they would make another one, and another one. They would find ways to continue following the characters and making new stories, and angering the real movie critics by not producing new and original stories. Financially, it's just safer to keep with a successful property. You could risk your money on an untested idea, or you could make another Rocky movie. The safe money is on Rocky. So while the vocal people were lamenting the dearth of original films, the ticket-buying public were lining up for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Cocoon is a movie about old people being rejuvenated by magical alien pods in a pool. It made a lot of money because it was fun and well written and so perfectly 1985, but it's a movie about old people in a pool. The sequel was released in theaters in 1988. Look, it's frustrating if you want to make art, but it makes sense if you want to make money. So if an original movie made a splash, you were going to get a sequel, no matter what. I mean, that's what still happens, but because of superhero movies, we now also have reboots. Obviously, this kind of thing happened before superhero movies did it. Specifically with horror films, I'm thinking New Nightmare and Halloween, those stand out for me. But it's really the success of the same Spider-Man story 3 times that shifted things into high gear. And we all started losing our minds. Rumors of every major property being rebooted started going around, and we started stating unequivocally that this movie couldn't be remade. This TV show didn't need a reboot. This thing was already perfect. But for every awful reboot, there's one that did the unthinkable. It exceeded expectations and was just better. And they're the problem. RoboCop was remade in 2014, and it was not great. I think RoboCop fans have already forgotten that it happened, and they're very happy to erase it from their memory. But in the same vein, Dredd, the 2012 Judge Dredd reboot, was so incredibly good that I don't even want to think about Sylvester Stallone's movie ever again. The Karate Kid was remade in 2010, and, well, it shouldn't have. But guys, have you seen Stephen King's It? As long as some of them work, they're going to remake all of them. For every 2000s remake of Charlie's Angels starring Drew Barrymore, you're going to get a 2019 remake of Charlie's Angels not starring Drew Barrymore. If it worked the first time, like the 1976 Carrie did, they're going to do it again, like the 2013 Carrie did. And this can cause some issues in the communities I belong to, because we are nostalgic and overprotective of our media products, because we define ourselves by the entertainment we choose to consume. We are the vegans and crossfitters of the entertainment world. We love to talk about our thing, and we will bring it up. For better or worse, these things are part of who we are. It's a major part of our identity. When somebody says they're going to remake or adapt an original property, and that property is a thing we identify ourselves with, what we hear is, "You're not good enough, and we want to make a better version." It's an attack on who we are as a person. We've spent all this time loving something and promoting something and evangelizing something, and now someone has come along and said, that thing needs fixing, and I will fix it. And we are left standing there desperately arguing that it's not broken, that we're not broken. And then sometimes someone does fix it, and it is better. And then, who are we? This is the human part of us all. The things we like, the things we share, they define us, and they also serve as that special golden ticket invite to a community. A group of like-minded people who, like you, are defined by this piece of art. And you begin to feel an ownership over it. There is a money aspect to this, yes. I know that studios are trying to make money. But those studios usually hire artists who love something. And when those artists love the material and care for it, the new art created can sometimes be better than the original. And these artists are just doing what we're doing. They're trying to share something they love with new people. But for us, it feels like an attack. It feels like they're taking away our thing. So we are quick to arms and quick to declare that this is untouchable. This is where we draw the line. I'm a father of 2 incredible young women, and because of them, I have been able to share my stuff with them, speak with them about it, explain why something has affected me and why I love it. And sometimes they agree. But I have seen the other side of this. What a remake can do, where the magic of a remake lies. It makes it theirs. This connects to them, and they get to own it because it was made for them. Someone amazingly talented said, "I love this so much. How do I give this gift to someone new?" And they did it by presenting it in a way custom baked for them. I have daughters who love stuff. And some of the stuff they love is just for them. It's not stuff they got from me. It's a powerful thing to see entertainment and media connect with my daughters and be a part of who they are, because that's who I was as I was becoming me. And I like me a lot. And they're going to like themselves too. We share a lot of the same things because we love each other, but they also have their own thing. And sometimes their own thing is the reimagining of my thing, and has become their thing because it belongs to them. There are two things that made me not really worry too much about remakes. The first, which should be obvious to everyone, is that it doesn't erase the original. If you want the original, that's still there. I think the real fear for people is that the remake will be good and people won't care about the original anymore. And then what will we do? The second is that my personal favorite piece of media ever is one that doesn't suffer from one perfect vision syndrome, because the creator of that piece of art kept changing it all the time. Douglas Adams created a radio series called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It is incredible, and at the time it was a huge hit. So much so that he was asked to remake it into a novel to sell, which should have been easy enough, and just adapt the script to novel text. I mean, that's simple. But Adams kept having new ideas and decided to put those new ideas in the book, which means the book isn't really like the radio series. The book sold like hotcakes, and Adams was asked to remake it into a TV show, which should have been easy. He had radio scripts and a novel, so he could just do that. Except he kept having ideas, and so he put those into it, and now the TV series isn't really like the radio play, nor is it like the book. When the TV show was finally turned into a feature film, you're never gonna guess. He had more ideas, a lot of which made it into the movie. Since the movie was shot posthumously, there were some additions by Cary Kirkpatrick, but the script was still basically Adams's. My favorite piece of art was remade several times and changed several times, and they are all incredible. So when someone remakes something, it doesn't scare me. There are times, I concede, where the idea of a remake falls short, but that's because the original vision is lost. The meaning of the work of art is gone. Planet of the Apes by Tim Burton comes to mind. The original film was an allegory for humanity, and the end reveal is one that says, humans are a problem and will fail as a civilization due to their greed and cold-heartedness. But the Tim Burton remake's ending says, guys, we shouldn't space travel on account of there's a scary planet of monkeys. The whole point of the film is erased. It's in cases like these that I think a remake has failed, because the soul of the art is gone, and it's these remakes I want stopped. A Star is Born makes a lot of new decisions and a lot of changes to the previous versions, but it sticks to the message and center of the idea. An artist at the birth of their career going up, an artist at the end of their career going down, and the pain of love in the face of selfishness and pride. You can change the circumstances as long as the point remains the same. These are the types of remakes that really hit home for me. The ones that can build a new body around the original skeleton of an idea instead of superficially changing the parts of the body and saying it's new. The Ghostbuster reboot failed because of this. Instead of building on the meaning and soul of the original, they instead just changed the gender of the characters and then had them just do the movie. And the movie was fine. I'm fine with the movie that was made. But it wasn't special. It wasn't more. And it felt like what it is. A phoned-in version of the original, but with different actors. I think a lot more could have been done here, obviously, but everything I would do seems to be coming soon in the Ghostbusters Afterlife. Which I guess begs the question, what counts as a remake? Ghostbusters Afterlife follows the events of the original films. It's not starting over from scratch, which means it's basically a sequel. But it's changing the look, the feel, and setting up a new cast of characters. This is not my Ghostbusters. This will be my daughter's Ghostbusters. This is the passing of the torch. So is that enough to make it a new thing? Or is it just a continuation of an old thing? I honestly can't answer that. I get into a lot of discussions over whether the new Jumanji movies are reboots or sequels. They happen after the original. They reference the original. They are a continuation of the original. So technically, that would make them sequels. But they don't have the original cast or the original feeling and are very much their own thing. I think these are more remake than sequel personally, but the argument can be made either way. Because we like to label things specifically, this kind of remake is often called a soft reboot. It's not starting over from scratch, but it is also just going to be a different thing than the original. That's what I would have done with Ghostbusters. I like the cast a lot. I like the characters, and I would have preferred that some of them be the daughters of the Ghostbusters, keeping the family business alive, hiring new Ghostbusters, dealing with more relevant and current issues. It doesn't need to be Ghostbusters 3, but it should have tried to build on top of the original instead of recreating it. I say that, and yet I'm still in love with the dramatic fan-created trailer of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the one that turns the sitcom into an hour-long family drama. I think it looks incredible, and I want it. And it doesn't need to be a soft reboot. It can be brand new. Never reference the original. I don't even want it to. I don't want Will's kid to move to Bel-Air. I want a new Will. But changing tone can be tricky, and will alienate people who were there for the feeling of the show. Fresh Prince was a comedy that dealt with heavy issues, but it was first and foremost a comedy. If what you're looking for is a comedy, then a family drama isn't going to be your thing, and you are not going to like the remake. A lot of people felt that way about the Evil Dead remake, because it didn't have Raimi's sense of humor. What it did instead is focus on the horror and suspense, which I think is ironic because that was Raimi's original vision. He wanted to make a horror suspense film, but he failed so hard that people thought he'd made a funny horror movie. The last true obstacle to a remake is, can it even be done? Does it make sense? I love Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I was thrilled they made a new sequel, but if they announced a remake of Bill and Ted, I'd be confused. How would you even do that? Why would you even do that? A time-traveling phone booth is anachronistic now. It makes sense as a classic film, but not a contemporary one. What mechanism would be used? In reality, that's a moot point because the movie isn't about the phone booth. It's about passing a history class, so it doesn't really matter. But then, who's going to play Bill and Ted? The characters are based on personality types that are also anachronistic. So you'd have to change them from garage rockers to, SoundCloud artists? And they'd have to be naively dumb in a different way. Also, this is doable. It's all doable, and it could work. But the first reaction will always be, why? It's a snapshot of a specific moment in time, and if you're going to change so much of it, why not just make a new movie? I truly believe that this was exactly the question asked and answered by the writers of Dude, Where's My Car? Go back and watch that again. I think that film is a reboot of Bill and Ted, after they realized, why remake Bill and Ted if we have to change so much? Then there are movies that are iconic and live on because of the moments of the movie. How do you remake that movie without just doing a literal remake? Gus Van Sant remade Psycho, which is a film that doesn't leave a lot of room for new ideas. So instead, he did a shot-for-shot remake of the film, and, well, it doesn't matter which one you watch. They're the same. So it doesn't even matter that it was made at all. Gus Van Sant's Psycho proved that a remake needs to add or subtract, or in some other way change the film. If you're going to remake something, do something to fix problems with the original, or update it to be more contemporary, or build upon the original concept and allow it to grow. I've said that remakes don't bother me so much, and I don't fear them, and for many things that is true. But there is one film, one movie remake that terrifies me to no end, and it scares me because it's part of me, of who I am. It's mine. And it's perfect, and I'm afraid you'll take it away from me by trying to make it again. I have a memory from childhood of watching a film. I remember loving that film, and that film making me feel good while I watched it. I can still vividly remember a scene where one character rolls down a hill and then another one rolls down a hill while they both profess their love. I also remember learning about ancient plays at the time and famous stories. I was probably 7 or 8, and I think I combined the film I saw with the things I was learning at school in a way that either my brain or children's brains do. And so for a very long time, my favorite movie was Romeo and Juliet. And my favorite scene was when Juliet rolled down a hill after Romeo proclaimed his love for her. Years later, I was introduced to The Princess Bride for the first time, only to realize that I had never seen a movie version of Romeo and Juliet, and this was definitely not the first time I had seen The Princess Bride. I was also old enough to start really understanding the humor and just how clever it was, and it became an obsession of mine. I still watch it 3 to 4 times every year, and it is still my favorite film of all time. There's so many things in the film that seem untouchable. The actors and their characters are so iconic to me that it would be impossible to replace them. The dialogue is so ingrained in the fabric of society that you couldn't change it. But here's the real issue. You can remake The Princess Bride. It's period fantasy, so there's no anachronistic issues. The story is standard fare for a fantasy film. There's plenty of room to play around in the world William Goldman created. In fact, William Goldman, like Douglas Adams, already messed around with it when he adapted the book because he had new ideas. I firmly believe that The Princess Bride is perfect and it should never be remade. I also think that, due to something very special about this particular work, it is perfectly adapted for a remake. So here's how I do it. The first issue with remaking The Princess Bride is, what do we do with the story of the film? Do we keep it the same? Do we put a sick kid in bed and make him complain? That's doable, but now we're getting really close to Gus Van Sant territory, and I think we got to go a completely different way. I think we do a soft reboot. The premise of the novel is that S. Morgenstern wrote a history of Gilder, and that it was encyclopedic and long and dry and a chore to read. And so William Goldman wrote this version which only had the good bits, which made for a better read. To be very clear, the whole premise here is that William Goldman remade the original story to better please the new generation. That's why the official title of the book is The Princess Bride, S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and high adventure, The Good Parts, abridged by William Goldman. So, I think we start the movie with Fred Savage. Fred Savage is an actor, and he's abroad somewhere. I assume it'll be Italy, because why not? So, Fred Savage is in Italy filming a movie, and his wife is back in LA, and she's gonna have a baby. They're first, because Fred has been focused on his career, and so has she, and now that he's 44, and she's 30-something, because, Hollywood, they're ready and excited for this new chapter of life. He realizes that he's near where the historical land of Gilder was, and he remembers fondly the times he spent with his grandfather as he read him the most incredible story. He wants to share that with his unborn child. It meant so much to him, and he wants to keep the tradition going. So he goes to the bookstore, and he buys the S. Morgenstern book and takes it back to the hotel, and realizes that this is not what his grandfather read him. He calls his dad and asks if he knows where Grandpa's book is, and he's told that nobody could find it. And Fred, realizing that his grandfather, or his grandfather's grandfather, must have written the version he was read, is dejected at first and then decides, you know what? I can do that too. And every night after he gets back from set, he rewrites the story so it only has the good parts. And then he reads it on FaceTime to his wife and their unborn child. We're going to change the tone a bit. We're going to go from a snot-nosed kid to a loving wife, and from an ornery grandpa to an excited, enthusiastic fanboy. Even the interruptions can stay, but instead they can be about, did you change that? Or, is that in the book? Really? This is going to let us pick and choose what we keep from the original, and maybe even play with expectations by making iconic lines and scenes have a different purpose and meaning. It will allow us to add new ideas and subtract old ones. It will also allow us to change the actors because this story is being told by Fred and not by his grandfather. And so we are seeing Fred's vision, and that will allow us to put different actors in the main roles. For the longest time, I truly believed that it would be impossible to find an actor with the stature and the charisma necessary to be Fezzik. And then I watched Nonso Anozie in Sweet Tooth, and it hit me that he would be a perfect Fezzik. Not the same as Andre, but great, and in his own way, perfect. I'm not gonna lie, this whole episode is only happening because I found a Fezzik. It'll be hard to cast everyone, but it's doable. I kind of like the idea of staying away from A-list actors, but I'm not going to lie that watching Tom Holland in Cherry and Spider-Man and Chaos Walking have me believing that he can switch from goofy to confident and be a really amazing Wesley. Inigo Montoya could be either Diego Boneta, who I think is incredible and seems to be on the verge of making it super big. I mean, look him up. I think he'd be great. But if we want to stay a bit older with Inigo and stay iconic, I think Pedro Pascal needs more work. I'm sure he's not too busy. I'd love Paul Rudd or Ryan Reynolds as a Humperdinck, but maybe I'm just being silly now. Buttercup is a tough one, because I think Zendaya is an obvious choice, but I think she's too self-assured and self-confident in her recent characters, and I'm not sure if she can pull off the slightly less empowered imprisoned princess. Buttercup is tough and sarcastic, but she's also scared and trapped. There's a reason Robin Wright went on to great acclaim. She's an incredibly skilled and talented actress, which is why Buttercup worked so well, despite being in a comedy ostensibly for families, which doesn't really require that level of craft. So, Zendaya could be great, but I'm not opposed to Sophie Turner either. I think we just rehire Wallace Shawn. I don't think there's any reason to mess with Vicini. The story can and should include some of the most iconic lines and set pieces, but can also have room for new ideas. And since I'm getting silly, let's make it a short-run series for Netflix. Every episode is another night after Fred's day on set, reading to his wife and unborn child. The Princess Bride is about fencing, fighting, torture, revenge, giants, monsters, chases, escapes, true love, miracles. But it's also about sharing something you loved. Something important to you. Something that defines a part of you and sharing that with someone you love. The grandfather with his grandson. Fred with his wife and unborn child. Me with my daughters. The story is about loving stuff and presenting it as a gift to people who are important to us. I don't think we should remake The Princess Bride. I already share it with my kids. But I also think The Princess Bride could be theirs. And it can be done with love. And it can be wonderful. Maybe it's time to let go of The Princess Bride just a little bit and let it belong to someone else. Give it as a gift. Remake it for another generation. At its heart, in all its forms, The Princess Bride is about our love for something and our desire to share that special something with people we care the most about. It's about sharing a part of yourself and saying, I love you, in a way that is pure and unspoken, and real. Our theme music is provided by Double Experience. You can find the track Bill Murray everywhere you get music. And my ability to take time out of my week to make this podcast is supplied by my supporters at patreon.com/nerdincorrect. If you support us on Patreon, thank you. And because you do, you're listening to this episode a week before anybody else. And if you want to be part of that club, head on over to patreon.com/nerdincorrect, where you get early access to all our podcasts, an exclusive podcast, and so much more. You can also join our Nerd Incorrect Discord server, The Incorrection, where we can discuss in more depth everything I talked about today. If you want your question and or comment about today's podcast featured in next week's episode of discussing the adventures we have from inside the house, you can drop it into our podcast-specific Discord channel or comment on the Patreon post of this episode. All of the comments on the Patreon will be featured, and if possible, as many of the Discord comments as well. I'm Tim Riel. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week as we discuss more of the adventures we have from inside the house.
I'm uncool, I'm the uncle that everyone's built, and that's alright with me, 'cause I I'm a walking, talking magazine. We all know that nobody reads, but what's the use in words when nobody understands me? What's the point of trying to be someone that I can't be?